it is not just about what Israel wants to do in the Middle East vis-a-vis Iran or anywhere else. It's about what may happen here, okay? There's a video that's making its rounds on the internet. It's not fake. It's not falsely suggestive. It is Islamist extremists organizing and proposing intifada involving the West. Listen to a piece.
More than 3,000 activists were in attendance. Speakers celebrated the October 7th massacre, called for resistance against the West, and mapped out a vision for the destruction of America from within.
The Palestinians who came to the United States understood their role immediately upon arrival.
We, the movement for Palestine in North America and across the world, are here to fight until victory.
Now, by the way, incredibly prejudicial to Arab Americans and Palestinian Americans, okay? The idea that every member of a faith or an ethnicity is part of some extremism is nonsense. But it does focus the light on what is happening in our country, and not just with Islam or even Islamist Americans. So, Elica LeBon, attorney, understands the history very well, has family in Iran, has been watching with great concern. Good to have you, my friend. Thank you for being here. So, we get distracted by what's happening over there, and we see protests here, we see pushback here that is usually dismissed as suffrage, as identifying with the oppressed, and that we should care about the little guys and who's getting attacked. You worry that something else is also taking root.
Yes.
What?
I mean, several different reasons. I mean, first and foremost, that this is something that we ourselves saw in Iran, 1979. The backdrop of the revolution, or should I say the coup in 1979, looked very, very similar to what we see on the campuses here in America. It was the same kind of philosophy of, you know, you had this like communist ideology that was deeply pervading the Iranian psyche. And from that, they were moved to, from the universities, you know, it was the student university revolution, again, to kind of do this whole revolt of like against Western imperialism and against tyranny and against all of these ideas that were being instilled in them by this Islamic Republic that hadn't even been formed yet, you know, before its nascent years, the Ayatollah from France and all of that stuff. And so we've seen something that, you know, a lot of Americans would say, well, this isn't quite that. You know, we have a lot of significant more safeguards that would prevent that from actually happening. But I think what we need to take a look at is some of the trifectas of things that are kind of coming together that are, you know, at risk of making such a thing at least plausible. So I think there's a few levels to look at this from. There's the ideological perspective, and the ideological perspective behind this is, as you mentioned, the whole oppressed-oppressor class. Now, the problem with this oppressed-oppressor class ideology is that it's very reductivist. And the reason that it's reductivist is because it's very rooted in American centrism. So Americans understand the history of America in those terms, right? They understand not only the history of oppression in America, but they understand the history, they understand the concept of an oppressor class. Now, an oppressor class is different to just an oppressive regime like you have in Iran, right? So the concept of an oppressor class leads to this understanding that there's an entire race of people that are culpable, which indeed was the case back in you know, Jim Crow era. If you think about Nazi Germany, South African apartheid, you did have classes that were participating in this oppressed dynamic. The problem is when you go to the Middle East and you try to look at the Middle East through this Western construct of imputing all of these concepts of like oppressor class and things like that in places where it doesn't belong. And in actual fact, you do have the oppressor class, but it's not the Jews, right? The Jews are the oppressed. And so through this ideology that, you know, all white people are oppressors as a class, as a race, all Jews are oppressors as a class, as a race, then what you do is you get the emotional charge behind these historic liberation movements, and you apply them to Jews as a class. And so that's why you're able to galvanize all of these people that, historically have stood for, like, you know, liberation movements, to be like, well, if we want to liberate ourselves, we have to liberate ourselves from the Jews, who are this oppressor class, even though historically that's never happened in all of time. Not only has it never happened, but they've been under the boot of oppression for 2,000 years, and in the Middle East, in fact, themselves served as the oppressor class under the system of dimitude, right? And so if we're really going to stand with anyone, we're standing with the Jewish people in the Middle East against supremacy, against oppression. But because of this Eurocentric, American-centric view of it, they've got it completely upside down.
Hey, thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your screen. And don't forget, click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.